Good morning, everyone. Jim Laird joining you live from Diriamo, Nicaragua. Hope you're doing well today. I'm going to go live over here on Instagram, and we are live on Instagram. Excellent. So I'm going to do my best to, I think I'm going to sign in under another account on Instagram. There we go. I can actually see the Instagram live. Obviously, don't want to listen to it, but that way, if anybody has any questions or comments, should be able to check and see. So, one of the challenges of being here in Nicaragua is I'd like to film more. Um, I think, the title today is why most beginners fail at strength training. And one of the things I am really good at and was very good at in my gym was taking someone who's never lifted before, and in a period of months and years, getting them to a very competent level of lifting. Particularly with women, taking women from like zero strength training experience to a 300-pound deadlift with minimal issues in a fairly condensed period of time, and doing it very efficiently. Not to say that everyone needs to deadlift 300 pounds, but most people don't set people up for long-term success, particularly women. Most women will quit lifting. My back started hurting, my knee started hurting, my low back was always tight, or it was uncomfortable, or it hurt. There was a lot of pain. Uh, Most women are not stupid enough to just push through that. Dudes will use, elbow sleeves. They'll use wraps. They'll use ointments and rubs, and they'll just push through pain, and they'll think it's just part of the process. And my argument is that if you load emergency strategies from the start, you're going to end up in trouble because you're going to run out of options really quickly. And I'm going to show you what I mean by an emergency strategy. And the thing that people don't understand is when you're a beginner, you haven't lifted before, just about anything's going to get you better. So why not do things when you're a beginner that put your body in a position for the best long-term success? Most of the internet, most of the content on the internet is based around extreme strength, extreme hypertrophy. So you'll have people say stuff like, "Oh, kettlebell deadlifts are useless." Well, for a beginner who's having to learn how to pattern a deadlift or a hinge position, kettlebell deadlifts are very, very helpful. And we're not necessarily doing the kettlebell deadlift to build an enormous amount of muscle. If that's your main goal, yes, they may not be optimal, but if you don't know how to get into a good hinge position, loading up a barbell or something like that is going to be not your greatest long-term strategy. You're much better off taking a few weeks in the beginning and learning how to get into a better position to efficiently do the deadlift. And then there's a difference between what I would call performance-based lifting and health-based lifting. And if you have to end in an emergency strategy to set a world record, a PR, that's totally different. Than that's what you go to. So first of all, I'm going to show you what I would call an emergency strategy is, in my opinion. And this is just the way I approach things. There's 10 million ways to skin a cat. This is the way I look at things. And it's very hard to give like everybody should do this. I'm just giving you ideas and principles that you can apply for yourself. So let's see. So we're going to share the screen here. And so if you bring most people in and you tell them to get into what I would call a deadlift position, let's see if we can find the right picture. I think it's that one. Yes. Okay. If you can see this, if you look at how this guy's positioned, and I don't know if you can see my cursor or my mouse. Let me see yeah, you can see. Oh, that's cool. You can actually see me moving. So his head is extremely jacked back, right? I would like to see eyes up, but a slightly tucked chin. And you have this really hard arch here, and that's okay. Like if you're an Olympic lifter, this is a great starting position. This is essentially where you need to start at. Okay. But for deadlift, and you're going to be deadlifting for a long period of time, with that head back and that hard arch and the hard retraction back there, basically all your load is right here. Okay. And if that's all you got, like if you're a beginner and that's the position you're using to lift and you reinforce that position and you keep loading it, and that's the only strategy you have, and you're using that to lift submaximal weights, your low back is going to become your limiting factor. Your low back is going to be tight all the time. You're going to end up in trouble. Okay. Now, if you have to get into this position, you're pulling a maximum deadlift and your head goes back and you arch hard to finish it, I'm totally fine with this. But if you're having to do this to deadlift light weights, or you're using this to deadlift the kettlebell, this is one of the reasons why people quit, because this is an emergency strategy and you don't want to load this right off the bat. And then you want to be able to shut this off when you're done. Right. So, and most people will take this position, this hard arch, to rows. They'll take it to dumbbell presses, bench press. What'll happen is every exercise they do in the gym will end up emulating this position, right? And squats too. They'll sit down and do a squat and they'll arch hard. And this position is extremely stable. You can create a lot of force in this position, but it has long-term consequences. So what do I do with somebody who's just starting out? A lot of it depends on their level of fitness. So we'll stop sharing that, and then we're going to share something else. I'm going to start using a lot of video from different people. I have some video of myself too from the last couple of years, or even before that. I'm going to start going over, because I don't have the ability to film anything here. I mean, I don't have much equipment. The gyms I go to are way too crowded, way too noisy. Most places are not willing to open it up during, non-hours for me to come in and film stuff. I haven't found a place yet. I will eventually, and plus my body is not normal. Okay. I'm not a normal body type. So me trying to demonstrate things, is not, it's not good, because the way I look doing things is going to be totally different than a normal person, right? So it's very hard for you to learn how to do proper technique from my body type, because I just move so differently than a normal person. I am not built like a normal person. So whatever normal is. But that being said, so now we're going to go to Connor Harris, who puts out a lot of great content. Great dude. Amazing content, great teacher. And this is a really great video. And we can use a wall for this, but most people don't have something to put under their heels. So that's why this bench, you could use a sofa, you could use a chair. Okay. And the whole idea behind this is you can have a foam roller in between your knees, a yoga block sideways, a squishy ball is best. But we're basically digging our heels into the bench, so to speak. We're breathing in through the nose. We're exhaling through the mouth. We're getting the ribs to come down. We're going to get a light engagement of the obliques. And we're going to basically just barely lift that. You're going to keep your low back on the ground, and you're going to barely lift that pelvis up off the ground. If you feel it in your low back, you've gone too high, too far. Essentially, we're trying to keep the low back in the ground, engage abs and hamstrings, so people can actually find their glutes, find their hips, find their hamstrings, and we're going to breathe through this. Okay. So this is generally, I want to get somebody on the floor. I want to get them to understand what it feels like to have their rib cage, their pelvic floor lined up, and to find their hamstrings. Okay. And a lot of people be like, well, what does this have to do with anything? But from what I've seen, if people can't find their abs and their hamstrings on the floor, they're sure as heck not going to be able to find them when they're standing up. So we've taken gravity out of the equation. Okay. What does it feel like to have my abs and my hamstrings engaged at the same time? What does it feel like to not have my low back being the main driver, right? So we're teaching you not to use your low back for everything. Most people are jamming into their spine to get their stability, so to speak. So that is something I take if I take somebody who's a beginner, I might start here and I'm going to pair it with some other things. I've got a little mini circuit that I've done. And that's Connor Harris. If you want to check him out, he's got tons of great content. So I have a little circuit that's part of like my beginner strength training course that's in our VIP membership at Stillman Wellness. Let's go to that. So here we go. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
So here I am. I'm in Florida and I'm doing an extended warm up. So basically, I'm going to do what's called a rope squat. And what I'm doing here is I'm stepping back and I'm basically going to unglue my shoulder blades. And because most people, when they squat, are going to go into that arch position. So I'm wanting people to go to the other extreme. The feet are together, close. I'm not trying to drive my knees out hard. I want to bend the knees. So I'm opening the upper back up. My head should be taller and longer. My head's looking down. That's not good. Shouldn't be doing that. I don't want to drive the knees out, but I'm trying to basically get into flexion just a little bit. Most people, when you ask them to squat, they're going to throw their head back. They're going to arch. Okay. Some people will round over, but most people are going to arch. So this is a really good way to kind of build that squat pattern. My eyes should be up. My head shouldn't be looking down. That's something bad habit I have. So I'll have somebody do like 10 of those, right? And sometimes if they're really in a bad place, I'll have them sit on a bench and do that, holding on to the rope so they don't go into that arch, right? So I would have them do that wall drill where they find their hamstrings and their abs. And then we could go do something as simple as a carry. I'm just going to go over and pick up a dumbbell. And I'm just going to pick that dumbbell up or kettlebell or whatever, something that's challenging but not brutal. And I'm going to walk. And then I'm basically going to swing that other arm just like that. Eyes up, long. Real simple. And I would go probably 15, 20 yards and then switch hands and come back. Now, this next thing I'm going to do is called a walk up or an inchworm. I call it a walk up. And this is a really good way, particularly for people with tight low backs. Basically, I'm starting in a push-up position. You can see I'm long. If I have somebody who has a hard time with this, I could start them off in bear, which would be knees on the ground, reaching away from the floor. They might hold it statically. If I have somebody who's in a really bad place, I might put a gymnastics mat down and have them essentially crawl back and forth on all fours. Okay. There's all sorts of different modifications for this, but all I'm going to do, and if you struggle with deadlifts, this is one of the simplest ways to get yourself back to your hips, is I'm just going to walk myself up. See, I don't want to hump the floor. I want to walk myself up, and I'm basically getting myself back into my hips. And I'm going to come back down. I'm going to own the bottom, and I'm going to come back up. If you do like 8 to 10 of these in between, if you struggle with deadlifting or hinging, if you do 8 to 10 of these in between first couple sets of your deadlifts, you're going to feel so much better pushing back into your hips. So I would do with a beginner, and I might do more floor warm-up stuff. It's going to depend on the person, but this is what I call an extended warm-up. I would do something like what I just did, a 90-90 bridge on a wall or on a bench, paired with a walk-up or a bear crawl, paired with a carry, paired with a rope squat. And we would go through that 4 times. And maybe we go through that, if you're a beginner, we go through it 6 times. And maybe we do a little bit of sled afterwards or a little bit of riding an Aerodyne bike or something. It depends on your fitness level. And then the next time you come in, we would check and basically see, okay, how did that go? I mean, I've had people that did basically the warm-up I just did on film 4 times through, and they come back and like, oh my gosh, I was wrecked, So I know that we need to stay there for a while, or we need to back off a little bit. Maybe we need to do some breathing drills And then generally at the end, we do some sort of breathing, crocodile breathing, or we breathe in a deep squat just to let the low back relax. Most people are so toned up and so, they either have like their pelvis is either pushed forward, they've got a big interior pelvic tilt, and we need to get the guts and everything to move back. We can relieve that pressure, that compression in that low back. And that's why most people end up with like L4, L5 problems, because they've got that massive compression, and then they're loading, really hard arch on squat, really hard arch on deadlift, and then they're arching on their presses, and they're arching on their rows, and they're arching on their pull downs, and they're arching on their curls, and they're arching on their tricep extensions, and they do nothing but arch, 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 arch. And then because they're basically reinforcing that pattern constantly in the gym, they're taking that pattern out into everyday life, and they just lose movement options. And over time, that low back just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and you end up having issues. That's why a lot of what I do is taking people in the beginning to the opposite extreme. Of course, there are other situations where you need to start differently. Not everyone presents with that hard arch, but getting people to learn how to, because if you're driving that hard arch in the deadlift on the squat, guess what? When you go to do lunges, you'll see people doing lunges, where they're here and they're doing their lunge, and they're essentially arched, particularly when they do rear foot elevated. They'll arch really hard, and they're actually doing a lunge with their low back. So, we want to get them, I'll put their arms out in front of them, and so they're stacked and tall, and they're not jamming into that low back to do their lunge. But you'll see that a lot, where people will arch really hard when they do a lunge. I'll have them put the dumbbell slightly in front of them to get them to not glue their shoulder blades together so hard. You'll see it with everything. With step ups, you'll see people do step ups and they're arching. So once you've seen it, it's kind of hard to unsee it. And that's why I'll have people who are doing a step up, they might hold them here. I want the stacked rib cage and pelvis, so everything on the extremity moves well. We want to set that pelvis and that rib cage before just about any exercise. That way we're basically reinforcing more efficient movement, and we're not strengthening an emergency strategy. Now, if you're a strength athlete and you have to go places but if you look at like some of the best lifters of all time, guys like Ed Cohn, they all have, like, on their deadlifts and their squats, their pelvis and their rib cage is totally stacked. You look at good Olympic lifters, they may be arched in the beginning, but still they're going over their head. Everything, rib cage, pelvis is lined up. They might be arched at the beginning of the snatch, the beginning of the clean, but they're nice and stacked top to bottom. When they're going over their head, when they're doing the transition stuff, they maintain that zone of apposition. So we don't want to reinforce this position, the super hard arch. I think it's which one is it? That one. We don't want to take a beginner and reinforce this position. And if we do, we want to make sure we at least turn it off at the end, have them round over a stability ball, have them hang off a post in a deep squat, get them to shut this tone off and relax when they're done, if that makes sense. But turtles, like having people lay on their back and hug their knees and rock back and forth, that's a really good thing to do with people. But this is the big reason I see most people, beginners, particularly women, when they come to the gym, you can get really strong really fast like this, but there are trade-offs. And most people do not like the trade-offs of it. So, but if you can get people to tuck that chin a little bit and then not be so aggressively arched, brace circumferentially, they're going to have much greater success over a long period of time. They're going to be able to train more consistently. They're not going to be walking around with their low back, hurting all the time. And so that's my take on that. That's from what I've observed from, my 30 something years of working with people. And then training myself. I really like, when we're working with a beginner, I really like things like box squats, holding kettlebells, things like that. I really like kettlebell deadlifts for somebody starting off learning how to deadlift, because that kettlebell is right in the midline, and it's much easier for them to get everything lined up It's good to get into that position. It's easier to push the hips back. Obviously, kettlebell deadlifts are not great for long-term maximum strength or muscle development, but that's not your goal in the beginning. Your goal is to basically improve efficient movement pattern, and then basically from there build a foundation that you can load in a safe manner for long periods of time, and so you can train for years and years and years. And if you're moving a weight that, if you're an older person, older lady, or someone who's never lifted before, and you're using a 60-70 pound kettlebell over time, and you've never lifted before, that's going to provide a stimulus at first, but obviously not forever. That's where you transition into the trap bar or whatever else that you transition into. You can do alternating deadlifts. You can do all sorts of different things. So that's just my thoughts on that. I hope you have a great day. We have, if you want to support what Dr. Stillman and I are doing, we've got our Optimal Wellness membership at Stillman Wellness. That includes a Q&A with Dr. Stillman and myself, an extra Q&A with me. All of our Thursday webinars are in that course. There's an accountability app. You have access to Dr. Stillman's dispensary where you can get discounted supplements. You have access to all his protocols. We've got a lot of great content in there. It's $1 a day. It's a way for us to, basically for you to support us, since we don't do fancy sponsorships and all that good time stuff. We really want to simplify things for you and provide you with information that's simple, easy to follow, because there's so much noise out there. It's very easy to get confused, particularly when it comes to performance versus health. My answer is going to differ greatly if I'm working with somebody who's a high level strength athlete or somebody who's a high level performer than somebody who's just trying to get down on the ground and play with their kids. So there's a totally different animal. So I hope you guys have a great day. I'll be putting the subject up for Monday's live here probably shortly after this. But Dr. Stillman and I will be live on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And then we go live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern as well. Where that one's a private webinar that we send you the link on Wednesday night. So get on our email list, go to stillmanwellness.com, go to the bottom of the page, put your name on the email list. And that way, every Wednesday night, we send out a reminder. We send out essentially where you register for the webinar. It's here on StreamYard, but we don't stream it live, so it can be uncensored, and you actually can ask us questions. And it's just kind of our reward for basically you being on the email list. And we only send out like 2 emails a year, 2 emails a week, usually Wednesday and Saturday. The Saturday one is more of like, hey, what's kind of going on? What have you missed from this following week? Kind of keep you updated on what's going on. Every once in a while, we'll run a sale on one of our courses, but we definitely don't want to be spamming your email like some of the people do. And this is a business after all. So, but we definitely don't want to blow your email inbox up like some people do. So we appreciate you being here. If you have any suggestions for topics for our webinars or for our lives that you would like Dr. Stillman and my take on it, we would love to get those here. Thank you for watching. Make sure you get outside. I can't talk about enough how important it is to get outside. Sometimes I forget about it because I've talked about it so much. And I think that, I was looking at my YouTube channel and Dr. Stillman's YouTube channel the other day, and it's not like we have huge social media presence. I didn't really focus on social media for a long time because I was very focused on my in-person business. But Dr. Stillman gets like 10,000 brand new viewers every month. People that maybe have not heard about how important, getting outside is, how important sunshine is. And so I have to remember that I need to make sure I review, and I need to go back to the fundamentals. I need to continue to talk about the basics. Even the people that I trained in Lexington for years, I ended up having the same conversation over and over again until people really bought in. And even then, when people buy in and they go off the rails, it's usually, oh, I've just been really busy. I've neglected getting outside. I've neglected my walking. I've just been really busy. I've started having a couple of glasses of wine at night. It's affected my sleep, and now I'm not eating as good. So it's usually pulling people back to the basics, the fundamentals. I've been too busy to train. I've been too busy to walk. I've been too busy to make time for myself. That's a big one, a big excuse that we get. And so I have to remember on these videos that I need to remind people of the basics, especially if someone's never seen my content before. I need to continue to talk about light, the importance of circadian rhythm, getting outside, relaxing, turning off, all those things, while continuing to talk about other things as well. So have yourself a great day. Have a wonderful weekend. And hopefully we'll see you on Monday for our live.